I did a course for React, but it was mostly just projects. I don't like to like sit and be in tutorial hell at all.
Cool. I'm loving this because my coding challenge is all about learn by building projects. So great. Thank you for the the great advertisement. Even if you didn't use any of my projects. Julianna, we met when somebody mentioned your name as an indie game developer, which I think you said was not really your thing, but you have done some little games development around EdTech. So I'm curious, what is EdTech and what is your interest in it?
So EdTech is educational technology, and so I used to be a math teacher for 5 years, so I've always been really interested in educational technology because I've used a lot of it, and even as a student, I used some like interactive games and like simulation type things, and was just really really interested in how that type of thing could be used to learn and teach.
Cool. So a lot of people, so a lot of people's experience of EdTech as software engineers is probably going to something like Udemy or Coursera. How do those differ from what you've experienced as a math teacher?
So I had a lot of products that I used as a teacher that were not so great as far as like user experience, just some really painful UX for teachers. Just one of my most painful experiences was I had a bunch of like all of my grades in this giant like Google Sheets, and I had to, for all of my 150 students, I had to get all of that data and put it into this other website, which is fine, I guess. The way that they had me do it was I couldn't copy and paste. I couldn't even type in with my keyboard at all. I had to pick out of 1 through 5 for every single thing because these were like scores out of 1 through 5. I had to pick one of them with my mouse one by one. And when I would like for 150 kids for about 20 different assignments. So multiply that. And then like if I would like do half of my screen because I'm just on a laptop, if I like split my screen in half so I could see both the grades and the thing, it would show like 3 students tops because the formatting was just not good. It
That
was
sounds painful. That
very
sounds
painful.
really painful. What
I
about the software for the students? Was that any better?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. There was a lot of interesting software. I mean, I mostly was at schools where we had some of the like cheaper slash free software. So some of it was like good in some ways, but didn't give me like all of what I needed from the teacher perspective. Like I couldn't easily see all of the students work at once, or I wasn't able to like use it to actually grade easily. I had to kind of do that part by hand. I've kind of like seen some of the better software, but I didn't really get to use too much of it. I mostly was using like free stuff or just a lot of stuff that I made myself that was like paper and pencil stuff.
So again, a lot of it was a kind of very bad UX and that level of
Mm-hmm.
experience. Is that what
Yeah,
stimulated your own interest in UX then and building good UX?
it definitely helped a lot. I mean, I was interested in EdTech before I even started teaching. That was like an interest even just since college, but you can't major in educational technology. That's a very specific thing. So I went down the teacher route because I was really interested in just education in general. But definitely the technological side of things, like how can I make experiences
Right.
that can help
That's
people.
interesting actually when you mention it that you can't major in edtech because I want to say about 2007 people started talking about data science and really data science existed before that. We used to call it business analysts and business intelligence and various other things. But when data science came on the field on the scene, for lack of a better word, all these degrees popped up. Everybody had qualifications in it and training in it, and there was talk about it's a multi-billion-dollar business. EdTech is also described as a multi-billion-dollar business, and it covers everything from things like Udemy and Coursera and edX and all those platforms to LinkedIn Learning to all the stuff that schools, universities, colleges have. I mean, it must be tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of a market. It's quite
Mm,
strange we don't have the focus on that because again, that UX is so important. I'm thinking back to when I did my masters. Again, as a student doing the masters, the UX of the software the university had was awful.
yeah.
And so there must be a huge potential there. It's strange that nobody does that.
It's like you would need to kind of be a master of all trades because it's such a broad thing. Like I was interested in like making educational videos, potentially like figuring out how to make that happen with animations or coding or the educational side of things. I think it would just be very like broad. So maybe that's why they don't allow that. Although there are some colleges that I think are kind of allowing more of a multidisciplinary major.
Yeah, but it's a lot of those skills would be very useful if you have them combined with curriculum design. And how do you
Mhm.
teach this? How do you
Yeah.
access all that multimedia content? How do you bring it to life with illustrations and videos? And it would be quite an interesting and useful thing to do, I think.
Yeah. My first coding class in college, it was designed specifically for math teachers and math education majors. And like it sounded so interesting because they were talking about like, oh, you can build an app. It was all drag and drop, like very simple, like for kids kind of. But it sounded really interesting to me because I was excited about building stuff and just making things that I wanted to exist. So I like switched my major to math basically just to take that class because previously I was doing maybe wanting to do like biomedical engineering or something, but I was really interested in that class and it was geared like it was making things, but they were going more towards like trying to get you to teach computer science and I was more interested in like I want to teach math with technology. I want like the opposite side.
So it sounds like this interest in tech started long before you became a maths teacher and was kind of almost there. Sorry,
Mhm.
always there. So
Yeah.
is that why after a few years of teaching maths you decided to make the transition into tech?
Yeah, for the most part. And teaching was just not really being a sustainable job for me because I was working like almost every single weekend grading and then still felt like I didn't have enough time to do the job well. So it was just really not sustainable at all.
Yeah, from the outside, teaching seems like a great job. You get long holidays, you have short days.
Yeah.
Seems amazing, but my wife used to be a teacher when we met, and she was forever working weekends and evenings, and I
Yeah.
was kind of glad that I didn't do that. My job seemed a lot easier in tech.
Yeah. And I somehow still felt like I didn't have enough time to do all the things. And I'm like, I'm working like every weekend at least. Let me like be done at some point.
Cool. So how's the transition to software development been? What have been the kind of ups and downs of that journey?
It's been, I mean, it's a tough market right now. So I've just been enjoying my, I call it fun employment and just making things that I enjoy and that I'm excited about. So it's been, luckily I have enough runway to have that time to like learn and just, not be too stressed about getting a job, but it is getting to the point. I mean, I'm applying to jobs and trying to really find jobs that I feel like I would be a really good fit for the most part. There's a very limited amount of them because just any company you look at does not have a lot of junior developer positions at all. And I'm really interested in the ed tech ones and the startups. And a lot of those startups, if they only have like 4 people, they're probably not going to hire someone that's brand new, which is like reasonable. So it's just been really hard to find companies that I guess I'm a good fit for and that actually are willing to hire someone that's brand new out of the gate.
Yeah, I have to say that I've been in this industry for nearly 30 years now, and this is probably the worst I've ever seen the market.
Yeah.
It's cyclic like any part of the economy. And we had a bad time in 2001, post the dot-com bubble and telco crash. We had a bad time in 2008, 2010. It's a financial crisis. But this has been probably the most prolonged and worst. And I think a lot of things kind of all coming together at the same time and creating a lot of confusion. So interest rates, changes to the US tax law, which have just been reversed. So hopefully that might have a positive impact now. Economic and geopolitical instability, and then AI. And whether or not AI will replace people, which I don't think so, but also companies burning so much money on AI that they're not recruiting and they're cutting headcount to fund it. So I feel for you and everyone else starting at this time. It's a terrible time to be getting in. I think
Yeah.
that you've got to try and look for positive from it. If you can find the resilience to get through this,
Yeah.
you're going to be set up for the future.
For sure. Yeah. People will say like talk about imposter syndrome and I'm like, I think in any other job market I wouldn't even have imposter syndrome. It's just kind of like realistic. Imposter syndrome feels like it's not warranted and this is just like I'm just realistically looking at the job market right now and like maybe they're not going to hire me like legitimately.
There are a few signs, hopefully, that things are starting to improve. I've definitely seen a little bit of improvement here in the UK. A few more vacancies being advertised and a few more signs that recruiters are starting to look a bit more actively, but it's definitely very early stages of the recovery if we're there. So in the meantime, what is kind of your biggest challenge at the moment in addressing that, trying to find a role?
My biggest challenge, I think it's just the lack of like beginner jobs. Like so many of the companies that I'm interested in, and then I see a job that's kind of relevant, but they're wanting at least like 4 or 5 years of experience, and it's hard for me to compete because there's so many people that also want that same job. That probably also might have like I'm trying to use my education background and see if that can help me, but there's probably a lot of people that might even have that background too. So just the lack of jobs, I would say, is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? And as you say, I've spoken to at least two other people on the podcast who have transitioned from teaching into tech over the last few
Mm,
years. So, everything that we kind of think we might have some sort of unique edge in the background, there's always seems to be someone else that's got a
yeah.
similar background. So it's very difficult. I think one good way that you can stand out is by getting some experience volunteering, building in public, and networking. So you've done some building in public. You've built a couple of things that are on your portfolio site. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them and have you received positive feedback from them? Are they helping?
Yeah, so the first one started like way back about a year ago now. I started building this visual fraction generator thing that generates SVGs of fractions and like multiplication with fractions, division. So all these different images inspired by AIs being really, really, really bad at making math images at the time, like a year ago. So I was thinking like there's all these chatbots, but they're just giving kids like a bunch of text, and that's not really helpful because they need images. Also, I was making a lot of curriculum myself and selling it, so I needed these images too, and like there was just not a way to like get what I actually needed because I would have to go and like find someone else that had basically created these images by hand and like see if I could find one that was already made for me, but they didn't have anything that would like actually generate them. So, and I'm just learning vanilla JavaScript at this point and HTML, CSS. So this felt like a good way to just practice that and make something small-ish. I wasn't expecting to like make money or anything from it, but just something small to get practice with it. But that ended up taking a few months to make that all happen and like really get it to a point where I was happy with it and had all the features that I wanted. I learned a lot about JavaScript, like organizing a huge code base with like a ton of messy files and like variables from everywhere. I had just a lot of variable soup kind of spaghetti code, but I learned a lot about how to like refactor. It's still not perfect at all, but like just kind of getting some sense of how I could have made it more organized in the future. And also just like how SVGs work was really interesting to learn. So that was my first one. And then I spent maybe like 3 months learning React, going through a course, making some small projects, just like tiny little front end mentor things. And then I decided I was ready to start working on my game because I had planned out this game, like kind of come up with a design and prototype in like October. And then by January, I decided I was ready to start actually building it. So it's called Rectangles, and it is a like math puzzle where you have these rectangles and you try to fit them onto the board.
I have remembered that Riverside sent me an email recently saying that we can share screens on this and I can record that on the podcast. So,
Yeah,
should we try something new? Do you want to see if you can share your screen and give a quick demo of it for those that are
sure,
watching on YouTube?
sure. Okay, so this level is a little easy, so I'm going to show you level 2. Okay, so you have these puzzle pieces, drag them onto the board, and your goal is to fill up the board. But you have math operations that you can do to change these puzzle pieces, so you can rotate them. You can double and half the width if it's an even number. So here it's not going to work, but you can do that. So, but these helpful different operations you can do to make them fit however you want them to. So I can put that there, and then let's see, we have to change this to be 4 by 1, so I can double the width and half the height. Now that fits there, and then I can rotate this one. And then the cute little foxes are new. I'm very excited about them. Yeah. Um, so right now the math is not very evident. I'm sure if a kid played this, they would not get any math out of it because I haven't done it. I haven't like finished it yet. But eventually I will have it looking more like this, where there'll be numbers and you kind of can estimate like, okay, I want this to be 5 here, but I have a 10, so I have to like do this math to get it to look like how I want. Um, and you'll be able to do some other operations too. You can cut pieces to represent the distributive property. And it's not going to like actually teach you the things you would, a teacher ideally would have kids play it a little bit and then would be able to make the connections for them with them. But it's just good to get some intuition about how these things work, because I've noticed trying to teach concepts like the distributive property are just very not like things that kids think about a lot. They don't think about like, why would I ever want to split things apart and then do things separately? Um, so it's nice to have some like informal experiences with those before actually seeing something with math that looks like that, because that is like very strange to them to just see that without pictures or like squares.
So I love this because I always talk about learn by doing, and my main thing is coding challenges, where I encourage people to learn software engineer by building software. So you've both done that in creating your own project, and you've learned from that, going through the messiness of creating a big project and refactoring it and learning. But you're also building a project that's teaching kids to learn by doing as well. That's very
Yeah.
cool. What about the visual fraction one as well then? Can we have a look at that and talk through that?
Okay, share this tab. So you can make simple like 3 4/5 or something like that, and it'll show that. You can download it as SVG, PNG. These ones are not too, I don't know why that's not working. That's great.
The law of demos.
I haven't
Happens to
touched
us
this in
all.
a while, but it was working. Okay, let's see. So we have like 3 groups of 3 4/5. There we go. That's working now. So I'll make this simpler so you can kind of see what's happening here. Let's do like 1 1/3. So this is showing, if you think of it like sticky notes, like one whole sticky note and a half of another sticky note multiplied by 1 1/3 this way. The answer is like where they both overlap. Um, this is something that I usually get actual physical sticky notes and have them like cut them out and show me. Maybe even easier to see it like this for people that haven't done this math in a while. So like if this is half of the sticky note and then we want to take 1/3 of that, because multiplying is just taking a fraction of something else, you could think of it like that. So 1/3 of the half would be this little piece, which is 1/6. So
Right,
it's just
cool.
really showing how that works.
That's a nice way to visualize it, and a great thing for those people that much prefer learning by actually seeing what you mean.
Yeah, yep. That is definitely, I'm a very visual teacher and learner, so a lot of my stuff is very visual.
Cool, and it's a great demonstration that a lot of people in your position that are just looking to get into their first front end role have got the kind of to do app. They've got the very traditional, hey, built a portfolio site, but you've built genuine things in the market you want to get into. So that's really cool, and I hope that works for you, and that somebody spots that soon and sees it, because with a teaching background, you've built a portfolio around what you're looking for. That's solid. A lot of people can learn from that, and you're really doing the build in public. So there's a few people involved in a build to give movement, where people are volunteering time for charities and building websites on them, and a build in public where I don't quite know what they're doing. I think they're collaborating to try and help each other promote various
Like,
projects that they're building.
I see. The build in public, the like website that people are working on, that's like an open
Yes.
source thing. Okay. Yeah, I'm not involved in it, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it sounds
And
cool. I look forward to hearing more.
yeah, I've been trying to keep my focus as much as possible, although I've kind of done some other things on the way through making this game. But I find when I just have time to just work on it, I get really excited about it. So it's nice to just not feel like I have 10 other things that I'm also supposed to be doing at the same time.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Sometimes staying focused is a challenge, isn't it?
I've been in Gridiron Survivor, which is like an apprenticeship thing to learn how to work with a team, and we're building a Secret Santa app. So that's been taking some of my attention too.
Okay, getting ahead of things, ready for this year, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, they've been working on it before I even joined. Like I think like around last December was when they started. It was like a hackathon originally, and then it became
Right.
this apprenticeship program.
Okay, cool. So on the job hunt, have you tried any networking as well? You've talked a lot about EdTech. Have you tried reaching out to some of the founders of companies in EdTech or different people in that area and tried to kind of network, get an introduction?
Yeah. I've had a few chats with different people, like founders, small companies, and stuff like that. A lot of them are kind of like very tiny, or they have like 4 or 5 people, and they're like, maybe we could have you like contract or like work for free for a little bit. That kind of like, I mean, the contracting could be, but it was like questionably maybe not going to happen, or like maybe in the future. I think that probably is the answer eventually. Like that's probably how it will happen, I think, for me, because I'm very targeted in what I want. So it probably, that might be a better approach, because I feel like just posting on LinkedIn is like you can choose what information, like what you're showing, how you're showcasing yourself. Whereas like in a job application, you have to answer whatever questions and just use whatever format they have.
Yeah, I think you want to try and use as many different platforms as possible. Having that high relevant portfolio you've got, posting on LinkedIn, but also reaching out, trying to build those relationships with people
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
very important. And at every level, no matter what level of experience you are, that network helps. So that the more you can do to reach out to people is beneficial.
Yeah. I have this habit of going on LinkedIn and like sending friend requests to people that seem really interesting, but I don't pay for LinkedIn, so I usually don't message them. I just like, because you can only message like 5 people a month, so I like have all these cool people in my connections, and I've just never messaged them because I forget who. Like whenever it tells me like this person accepted your friend request, I'm like, I don't know who that is. And like sometimes I look at it again, but cool. But yeah, probably if I really wanted to get a job, I probably should just go through my list of like cool people that I'm connected to and message some of them. That would be very smart.
Yeah, start having some coffee chats, start building those relationships because they help in everything. I mean, you know, I've got a bit more grey hair. I've been around this longer, so I've met more people as a result of that. But every so often there are people that I might have met 5 or 10 years ago that will suddenly reach out and say, "Hey, we're doing this. We need somebody with your skills. Do you
Mhm.
happen to be free?"
Yeah.
And sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. But again, that network has been so powerful
Yeah.
and so useful over the years. There's that old Chinese proverb, when should you plant a tree? The best time is 20 years ago, failing that today. It's the same with building your network. You want to start building it long before you need it and as early as possible.
Hmm.
And focusing on how you can give to that network, how you can build those relationships, because you never know quite how it's going to come back to you.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I started having a few people recently sending me like very specific like math education software engineering jobs, and I'm like, yes, finally, the personal branding, it's working.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. So, how did you come to personal branding then? What opened that path to you? What made you think of trying to use LinkedIn and whatever other social media you might be using to do that?
I guess I just heard a lot about it because I when I first started learning to code and was, so at first I was just like listening to a lot of podcasts about like what kind of boot camp should I go to. Back in like when I was still teaching, that like second half of the year, I kind of knew that I wanted to do some kind of boot camp or something, which I didn't end up actually doing a boot camp, but I was listening to podcasts about like what boot camps offer, how do you get a job, like a bunch of different stuff like that, different people that had transitioned education to software development people. I heard a lot about posting on LinkedIn often, how that was very helpful and like build in public. So I think it just came up enough and enough. And then I posted a little bit and I found it very distracting. Like, I don't, and I also just like, I'm very shy, I guess. I don't like posting, putting myself out there sometimes. But it was also just extremely distracting. So it was like, I'm either going to like post on LinkedIn and like actually interact, or I'm going to like get stuff done. And then so I would like post a little bit, and then I kind of like didn't post for a while because I was trying to actually be productive and do things. But once I started realizing, like, okay, maybe just regular applying to jobs isn't working, and kind of got some even more encouragement to keep building in public and posting, I finally was just like, all right, I'll just schedule some posts, and then I won't actually like go on LinkedIn to see when it posts or whatever. And that helped.
Cool. Yeah, I've been quite similar. I found networking valuable for many years, so I joined LinkedIn something like 20 years ago. But then I didn't do anything on it for. I mean, when I moved jobs, met new people occasionally, kind of sent them a connection request, so I accepted them. But other than that, didn't do anything for
Yeah.
most of the time until 2023, when again it became so many podcasts, so many things I saw said, yeah, build a personal brand on LinkedIn. So I was like, okay, I should probably try and do that.
Yeah. Right? That seems useful.
Yeah, so far it has been.
Yeah.
So it's worth doing. It's worth pursuing it and giving it a go. But as you say, it can become hugely distracting. So it's trying to find that balance. Cool. So you said you didn't do a boot camp. Kind of what did you do to learn tech? How did you bridge that gap from maths teacher to software engineer?
I really wanted to do an in-person boot camp, and there was one in Austin, so I was pretty gung ho on that one option. And they put the start date off for at least 2 or 3 months, and then eventually realized they didn't have enough people to make it happen at all. And in those like 3 months, I had been learning a lot of stuff on my own anyway, so I was kind of like, there's no point in me going to another boot camp at this point. I feel like I'll be kind of bored because I had started on my visual fraction library like pretty deep into that already and had been learning like just regular JavaScript and CSS for a while. So I mostly did a lot of projects and just kind of learned as I went. So I used Front End Mentor and just watched a lot of like Kevin Powell videos, a lot of podcasts because I like to be active and not sit and like watch a video for a long time. So I tried to find as many podcasts that could teach me things as I could. Sometimes I was just learning about like really weird CSS things on podcasts.
That just I've got a weird mental image there trying to learn CSS by listening to a podcast.
There's a few decent ones. Like,
CSS to my mind is quite visual.
it is. But like I don't know, sometimes you're like, okay, I've already had the frustrating experience of like trying to center something. So now I can kind of listen to someone explaining it and it'll make sense. But if you had never tried to do it, then it probably wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
With the podcast, it was like finding the right podcast at the right time where it would make sense to me. I listened to a lot of podcasts that made no sense to me too, because I was like, I don't know what this means. Maybe I'll learn what it means. And was a little bit lost, but I don't feel it's like as much of a waste of time as like sitting in front of my computer and just like watching a video because I'm at least still like walking or being active. Um,
That makes sense.
a lot of projects, just like small projects just to learn things, and then my larger projects to I learned a lot more from doing those too. I did a course for React, but it was mostly just projects. I don't like to like sit and be in tutorial hell at all.
Cool. I'm loving this because my coding challenge is all about learn by building projects. So great. Thank you for the the great advertisement. Even if you didn't use any of my projects, that's cool. So do you put podcasts on when you're walking?
Mhm. Yeah. Um, yeah, I would have these like very specific like questions or like things that I wanted to learn about, and I would try my best to find a podcast that could answer it. And so a lot of times it was just like having these questions, and sometimes it was like for weeks, like I couldn't even formulate the question all the way. Because if I did, then I would have just asked like ChatGPT or something. But sometimes it's like I feel like I don't understand this all the way. React, like there was a lot of confusion with some React things like effects and stuff. And the podcasts were for just like deep technical React concepts, but I did find a few that were sort of helpful. But yeah, it was the React docs are actually really helpful, but I'm just not a sit down and read for a long time kind of person. But sometimes I did have to force myself.
So were there any particular podcasts that stood out then that were really, really useful in that journey?
Yeah, the React show was like very deep technical React concepts. And sometimes some of them were a little weird because he was like recording the podcast while biking sometimes. They were a little interesting, like somewhat interesting, but like just exactly what I wanted to learn about. He would just go so deep on things. And so I really enjoyed those. I listened to, especially in the beginning, a lot of HTML, all the things. They had a lot of good technical ones. I think the CSS one was bad at CSS. That was pretty interesting. They didn't have too
Great
many.
title.
Yeah, I know. I relate. What else? There were some more. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think those are the
Okay,
main
cool. You said
ones.
something interesting there as well. You said you would have just asked ChatGTP. So, everyone's raving about AI and a lot of people think it's a great way to learn these days, but it sounds like you found podcasts better. Or am I putting words in your mouth? Kind of how would you rate AI in your journey? How did it help? How did it compare to the podcast?
It definitely helps. And when I can come up with a very well worded question for a ChatGPT to answer, it was super helpful. It like when it's suggesting code to me, it's not always the most helpful, so you still have to be very critical when you're reading what it's suggesting for me to do. Like even with my game, it's suggesting that I use effects everywhere, which is not a good practice. But at least I like have read enough of the docs to know that that's not good. I would say they're both really helpful, but the podcasts are like just so nice because it almost feels like I'm not really working. Whereas like if I'm gonna sit down at my computer, that's like I'm committing to it. So I want that time to be really valuable. In a podcast, like I'm like driving or walking anyway. So like whatever. If if I like get like maybe two sentences of concepts out of it. Books too. Like I'll just read books that I like don't understand most of it, but it's still helpful because then you like go back once you actually have more experience to make sense of it, and then you can read it again and then probably read it a third time because I listen to audiobooks. So I like a one time pass is usually not enough for the technical books, but it's still probably if I read the paper book, I probably would never finish it. And like an audiobook, I can finish it three times over and like get a lot out of it as I read it once, have some experiences where it can start to make sense in my brain and then read it again.
So in a way, your kind of first pass is you're getting that unknown unknowns out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
You're becoming aware of these things, even if you don't understand them. And then you're going back the second and third time to dig a little bit deeper, understand it, after you've maybe done a bit of learn by doing. Cool, interesting approach. I have never done technical books and audiobooks.
I'm
Again,
doing designing data intensive applications right now as an audiobook, and that one is rough.
yeah, that's a great book, but as an audiobook, wow.
Don't ask me any questions about it because I have almost no experience with databases in general, so like I'm mostly front end. So I'm just getting the like, what would a non-technical person get out of this book, basically?
Right. Yeah, that's a book that I sat down and read with a piece of paper and drawing myself pictures and writing notes.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd have enough visual reference with an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
Kudos for doing that. It's an interesting approach. What pass are you on then?
Oh, just the first one. Just the
First one.
it's like and we're doing a book club in the apprenticeship that I'm in, so I'm like, yeah, like I'll read the audiobook because I don't think that would be a good use of my time right now to like actually sit down in my like, if I had limited hours that I want to sit per day, like that's not probably what I should be doing is reading that book when I'm mostly like front end and I don't have the experiences to make sense of it anyway, I don't think. Like you kind of need to have a little bit of database experience to even read that book and make any sense of it. So to me it makes sense to just be like, I'm just gonna like hang out in the book club and like kind of have sort of a sense of what's happening at a very high level.
But again, that's great because sometimes those things, maybe it's no use now, but in 3 or 4 years' time, the fact that you've done that and had that broad knowledge will really help somewhere
Yeah.
and give you that broad basis and some of the fundamentals that might allow you to kind of step in and maybe not quite full stack, but to go, oh, yeah, I normally do front end, but I get what you're talking about there. I can work better with somebody in the back end. So that's a great approach. Love it. Cool. That's some very different approach to how I approach things. So yeah, I don't think I'll be switching to that audiobook. I think I'll stick to my novels for the audiobooks.
Yeah.
Cool. It's been really interesting talking about it, Julia. Anything else that you'd like to share with the Coding Chats audience? I mean, coding challenges as well, because you've been great marketing my learn by doing and build projects.
Yeah. What kind of projects do you have?
There's 93 so far. Some of them are front end,
Okay.
but a lot of them are more back end focused because, I cannot send to a div. I do not. Well, I've been doing this long enough. I can pick up code in most areas, but any front end work I look for, think of the worst UX you've imagined, make it twice as bad, and that's something that I design. So
Got it.
I don't do front end work if I can avoid it. It's ugly and a horrible experience for everyone involved.
Yeah.
So I tend to wear a bit more to kind of the back end and networking things, but there are some front end ones there, like building a Spotify client and using their API.
That's
Again,
cool.
that's a great example of the ugly APIs that I build because my little demo of when I did it is quite ugly. There's some full stack ones like building a URL shortener, so you've got some front end and back end work and some database work there. There's a few games that can all be done front end, picking on some of the kind of classic games.
Is it just like whatever tech stack you want to use?
Yeah, they've all been. I wouldn't say you can use any tech stack for all of them because I probably wouldn't say build a DNS resolver in TypeScript. You might be able to, but I probably wouldn't suggest that. But yeah, they're stack agnostic. So I started writing about them when I was learning Rust. I've used a lot of them to learn Go. Again, my focus has been more back end. Some of them are things that I first did in 1995, 1996 when I was learning C. So they're projects I've used throughout my career. Some of them are newer ones, but there's quite a mixture there. So anyone that's curious, or if you're curious, check it out on codingchallenges.fyi.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. It sounds good. I need to learn more back end things.
Cool. Yeah, it's good fun. But I mostly like it because I suck at UX and making anything look nice. So I know where my strengths lie, and that's not it.
I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm not very good at it either.
I think that's unfair. I think the two things you demoed today have looked really good, and they
Thank
look
you.
really useful both for education point of view and really nice, clean design.
Thank you. The UX of making a drag and drop game with like variable amounts of puzzle pieces for each level has been very interesting, to say the
Yeah, I
least.
bet.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time, Julianna. It's been a pleasure talking to you and learning a bit more about it. I wish you all the best with the job search.
Thank you.
We'll put all your links in the footers, but what's the best way for somebody to contact you if they want to talk about opportunities, EdTech, and anything else you might have in common?
I think LinkedIn's pretty easy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way.
Cool. We'll put all the links in the show notes there. Anybody can.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for your time. Been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.